Welcome back, passionate investors. I'm your host, George Roberts, author of Passionate Living Through Passive Investing. And we all know that the market has thrown us a few challenges post-pandemic. A lot of big names in the industry that are facing lawsuits or who are at least having portfolios which are under significant pressure right now. It's never been more important to stay out of trouble. And that's the theme of today's show, how to stay out of trouble. And what I appreciate most about today's guest is his candor in discussing how he got into trouble and the long process of rebuilding. He's built a $100 million portfolio, lost it all, and rebuilt. He's also a coach through his company, My Core Intentions. And these are some of the reasons why I'm pleased to have the opportunity today to interview Mike Morawski. He brings a story that's built on discipline, a story of success, failure, and redemption. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hey, thanks, George. I appreciate it. It's been a while.
Yeah, great. And I always like to say that's my introduction, but I always like to give my guests the opportunity to introduce themselves. So tell our audience, who is Mike Morawski?
Yeah, I have quite a history. I've been in the real estate space for over 30 years. Prior to that, I had a general contracting business, was building residential room additions, and we're clipping at about 25 a year. And, being an entrepreneur, you do everything. And so I was going on sales calls and ordering material and hiring people and firing people and doing the bookkeeping and making sure projects were getting done, and still in the field banging nails and just burned out. And so, like any good entrepreneur, I sold my company and decided I was going to take a year off, or so I thought. Right? As an entrepreneur, I don't think we ever get to take time off. At least our mind is still spinning, right? But I went and I bought a couple of two flats in the Chicago market and rehabbed those. And during that time, I had met a real estate agent who was extremely successful, and went to him and said, hey, I think I want to go in the real estate space. And he encouraged me to do so. Went out, got my license, went into the real estate business. My first 9 months in the business, I sold 78 houses. Went on to build a team selling about 125 homes a year, and did that consecutively for about 13 years. 2005, I decided to go into the apartment business. And, George, it wasn't just one of those decisions I made one day, woke up and said that. It had been something that I thought about for a while. I had done a lot of work for some other syndicators in the Chicago market, and understood, or thought I understood, the business where you raise private capital, you marry it with a great real estate deal, you stay in the middle, and everybody does well. So 2005, understanding those basics, I went out and I syndicated my first multifamily property, and it did rather well. Over the next 30 months, I built a $100 million company. We bought 4,000 units in 5 different markets, raised about $18 million, went on, built a property management company managing 7,500 doors, and 2008 rolled around, and we crashed and burned. We came off the rails, very unstable. And I always tell people, George, I made 5 mistakes. And the first one was that I grew way too fast. No need to buy 2,000 units a year or 4,000 units in 30 months. But I grew way too fast as a company. I was undercapitalized, so I didn't have enough capital to run my company. I had over 100 people working for me at that point. We were over leveraged, so everything we owned, we bought at 85% loan to value, which is brain damage. I teach people today in my coaching program that you shouldn't be any more than 65% loan to value. Didn't pay attention to the details. So, asset management wasn't a big thing back then as much as it is now. And I really feel today that these deals are made and broken at the asset management level. And then the fifth thing was I didn't listen to people around me who were important in my life and told me that they were seeing things that they didn't like. And, I didn't pay attention to that. Wound up coming off the rails, and tried to save my company, though. So we had 38 companies at the time. We started moving money from profitable to non-profitable platforms. saying, thinking this is a recession, it's going to last 17 or 18 months. The markets will bounce back, and when they do, we'll put the money back. I did that under the guidance of my attorney and my accountant. And the only problem was I didn't tell my investors. And, George, we're in a very transparent business. So anything we do, we need to tell our investors about. And so because I didn't tell my investors, I wound up being indicted on mail fraud and wire fraud charges and got sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. So totally got wiped out, lost everything, my family, my business, and went to prison in 2013. I served about 8 years. And, this is the point where most people would say, oh, my God, your life is over. And, I actually thought that, too, for a while. And I went into the gym one day, and George, I always tell people I never flew private. I didn't have a big house. I didn't have a boat. I didn't have a fancy car. I was the neighborhood baseball coach. I was home most nights for dinner. And I got ripped from that lifestyle to live in a 12 by 12 room with 3 men I didn't know nor did I like, wondering what the hell happened in my life. And, I was in prison about 6 weeks and walked into the gym one day, and this guy walks up to me and he says, hey, don't let these people beat you. All they want to do is take from you everything you've ever known. You're a smart guy. You built a $100 million company. You can go do that again. But what you have to do is get right now. And, I'd gone from running marathons to being 35 pounds overweight, absolutely hated myself, and probably would have killed myself if I would have had the courage. But
so let me stop you right there. Was that the moment right there when you were approached and, the fellow prisoner says to you, don't let them take it all away? Is that when you decided that you were going to rebuild?
Yeah, 100%. That, I think we're all faced with defining moments in our life. And at that point, you have a choice, right? And I could have told this guy no, but I said, yeah. I said, you're right. And, so I started working out. I started losing weight. I started to feel better. I wound up going to college. I got a bachelor's degree in theology. I wrote 2 books while I was in prison. I wrote an ethics course. I taught real estate investing, property management, and ethics in prison for 6 years. Pretty ironic, right? A federal inmate teaching ethics in prison. I was on an outreach program. I had the ability to go into the community and tell my story to small business owners and local college students. Wound up writing a paper that got published in the Business Journal of Ethics and gets taught at the collegiate level for forensic accounting and sales and marketing classes. Came home, went in the coaching and training business, thought that that's all I would do. I didn't think I'd ever buy deals again or raise capital, and wound up finding a deal and partnering with 2 of my coaching clients on it. We closed that, but along the way, my securities attorney went back to the SEC and got me approved to be able to be a sponsor of deals again and raise private capital. So it's kind of funny because my life is kind of totally turned around here and gone full circle. And, today we own and operate a number of units in a couple of different markets, and asset management a little stronger. Our loan to values are a little bit with more strength in them today. And really enjoy the business and love what I'm doing and really love helping other people.
Okay, so let's go back to the event. So was there a moment before everything collapsed where you might have made a different choice but didn't? And what stopped?
Yeah, so I think there were a few places that I could have made different choices. I think the one that really makes most sense is, in 2008, I was in Cincinnati and I was trying to get a deal closed. And at the time, it was the biggest deal we had closed. It was about 287 units. And the money wasn't coming from my office. I was waiting on a $500,000 wire, and it wasn't being sent. And I couldn't get a hold of anybody in my office, and I couldn't find my partner. And finally, later in the day, my partner calls and says, hey, I don't know how to tell you this, but I moved money from the escrow account to the operating account because I needed some money and thought I'd have the money back for closing. And, at that point, I should have made a different change, and that would have been to separate myself from my partner because, he knew better than that. And when you start doing things like that and, commingling funds in that way, that's not good for anybody. And so I wound up dry closing that, going back to the office. I raised some extra capital, sold his equity in that deal off to bring some other investors in so we could get that deal closed. But the interesting fact was, and, I want any husbands to listen to this right now, I never told my wife about business. And we went to dinner that week with my partner and his wife. And on the way home that night, and my wife knows nothing, but on the way home that night, she says to me, I don't trust him. And I think I'm going to be a good husband at that point and say, honey, everything's fine. I have it under control. When in reality, what I should have said, tell me more. What are you seeing that I'm missing? And that was one episode, but 3 days later, I'm out to lunch with my attorney, and my attorney tells me the same thing. So I have two people in the same week that give me a red flag about the business relationship I'm in, and I ignore it. And I think, again, this goes back to what I said earlier, George, that we're faced with defining moments in our life. And we have a choice at that point. Do we take on those defining moments or do we ignore them? And, the first time I ignored it, the second time in prison, I took it on, right? And decided to make a change and become a different person.
So what would your advice be to people who are facing those difficult decisions? So again, a lot of people in trouble in business right now. If you're in commercial real estate, there's a lot of deals that are going bad over the last few years. Is it that simple? Just take on those defining moments, realize that those choices are going to be with you a lot longer than you might think.
You got to be transparent with your investors. Extremely important to be transparent with your investors. Communicate with them. And, I think to answer your question about what would be my advice is listen to people around you. Get your ego out of the way. A lot of us, we think, and I was in a position where, hey, I bought 4,000 units. I owned $60 million worth of real estate before the crash. I thought I knew it all, and I didn't. There's people that are smarter than you. You have to be in the right rooms. You have to hang around with those people, and you have to listen to that advice.
So I want to go back to the point where you mentioned getting the ego out of the way. So then if you go back to that moment or that series of moments, because I believe, as you said, that there were a few points at which things might have taken a different course. So what would be the advice that you would give to yourself? And do you think you would have listened?
I probably wouldn't listen because I think my ego was a bit out of whack at the time. There's no doubt about it. I sometimes tend to be the kind of person where somebody's got to grab me by the ear and say, hey, pay attention, and really to get my attention, Looking back, if there were two, and there were a couple more incidents around the same time that, this red flag kept coming up, and I should have paid attention, and I didn't. So I think if you're seeing things once and maybe even more than once that are saying, hey, something's going haywire here, something's going sideways, you've got to look at it.
Beautiful. I just want to make sure that people have the opportunity. If you want to reach out to Mike Morawski, what is the best way to do that?
Yeah, and George, I'd like to share that I have a free master class coming up on March 18th at 6 p.m. If anybody wants a link to that, they can email me or DM me directly. But I'm going to teach in that master class creative financing strategies. I bought a lot of real estate over the years, everything from single family to 400 unit apartment complexes with little and no money down. And I believe we're entering a market cycle where these types of opportunities show up every day. And I want to teach people how to use those strategies. So I'm doing a free master class. It'll be a couple hours long on March 18th at 6 p.m. But if you want to reach me, I am anywhere you hang out on social media, you'll find me. Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. We try to bring good content to the marketplace, relevant content to the marketplace, up-to-date news, helping people learn, get educated, and do their next deal. I love to network with people, so you could email me directly or reach out to me directly.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge and experience with our audience. Probably one of the more personal stories that we've heard on this show. Thank you.
Thank you, George. I appreciate the time.
Likewise.